In an earlier video, I showed you stitching on and ironing the binding at the bottom, and I went right into pinning the front, and I realized that it's actually much easier to put these sleeves in when the front is open. So I need to show you how to put the sleeves in before we do that. All right, I just lucked out. I just happened to grab the sleeve that has the double notch here in the back side. And I happen to be looking at an opening that has the double notch here. It isn't clipped in, you can't see it, but I know where it is in the back side here. And so I've mentioned before that this, in this pattern, the seam in the side here points towards the front, and that's just so that the pockets end up being smoother. And then there's roughly about an inch between the, trim this off here, just this. There's roughly about an inch between this seam to the front and the seam of the sleeve going to the back. And on your pattern, you'll know that you're in the right spot because when you bring this around, you'll find the double notch in the opening of the armhole. My pattern has gotten so used and so old that this double notch isn't there anymore in my back sleeve. But as I said before, I just know this distance so well that I don't need the double notch anymore, but you'll want to actually start by lining up the double notch on the opening and on the sleeve, and then working your way back towards the fact that these two don't actually line up. And that's fine because this seam here is actually a bit more towards the front of the garment in order to put the pockets in the right place, right? The pockets are not exactly on the side because we then would have to reach our arms too far back, right? So, but the sleeve is right under your armpit. Okay, so once I've gotten that set, and you'll notice that I pulled through and turned it around, then I'm going to pull my gather threads out so I can grasp them. And I'm going to pin it, not stretching it, not smoothing it, not easing it at all, just putting it in a normal way from the bottom all the way up to this seam on this side here, and on this side here up to that double notch that I mentioned. And coincidentally, my gather threads start right where that double notch is because when I did that step a while back, we put it there. All right, so the top of the sleeve, if we fold the sleeve in half right where the bottom seam, the seam in the underarm of the sleeve is, if we fold the whole thing in half right there, we can find the top of the sleeve. And your pattern, you may be watching this at a point when you got a pattern that has a version that had a little notch mark there. If I do that, that's great. And then you'd have a corresponding notch mark up here to match, or you could just fold it in half to find it. I'm going to finger press that in as opposed to using a pin. So now I've got a little finger press crease there, and I've got this pin right at the center top of the sleeve. And so I'm going to match those two. And now I'm going to use a different technique, right? Instead of finding the middle and pinning it, I'm going to use a technique where I basically fold it from side to side and eyeball it until I see that I have roughly the same amount folded over here as I have folded over there. And then I'm going to pin it in the middle of that space. So this is a little bit looser and more flexible, but given all of the gathers, so I'll repeat that and do it again, given all the gathers that are about to happen, it's not the need for it to be super precise, right? It's more about making sure that the fabric is evenly spaced all the way across. And so by pinning it a couple of times, by each of these little loops here now you can see is roughly the same height. And if we pin this at exact right spot there, we should end up with something that's roughly the same on this side as well. And so we can see that that is working out. When I get to here, I'm going to make sure that I actually pin it there so that I'm holding that pointing up. This seam, right, because I want to make sure I don't accidentally stitch it down. I'm going to repeat that here. All right, so now I've gotten it pinned in. These were the two starting pins here at the bottom of my gathering stitches, and then I had this one in the middle, and then I added two nope, I added 3 in between. And so now that I've gotten all of these little spots with their little loops roughly even, I'm going to find the gather pins, the gather strings, and I'm going to pull on one side to spread that gather all the way around. I don't want to pull too hard because what if this was short? I might accidentally pull it out, right? And I might need to pull from this end if my pulling didn't get all the way there, right? But the goal is to get this all nice and snugged down against the surface. And then as I'm stitching, which I'll show you in just a second, I'll use my fingernail to make sure and spread those gathers all the way around. So at this point, I'm now ready to stitch this one. I'm going to repeat this exact same process on the other side before I sit down to start sewing. All right, I'm going to talk you through stitching the bottom, the inside of the armhole. Now, I could actually slip the whole sleeve on like this, right? And it would be very comfortable and easy, but I want to keep an eye on my gathers, and they're on this side. So, in fact, I'm going to stitch it with the sleeve sort of opened like this. And that means that I have to keep turning it with my hands, but it's worth it to get smoother gathers. So I want to get these gather threads out of the way. I don't want to catch them because I want to be able to pull that gather thread out later if I want. And I'm going to set it down right at the bottom of the gather thread because I'd rather do the underarm first, get it out of the way, and then I have this feeling of accomplishment when I get to this end of this tricky bit there. All right, so I've got my 1/2 inch seam allowance. The important thing as I am stitching here is that I am keeping these bits pointed in the right direction. So I'm going to be feeling with my fingers. This is a perfectly fine place to go slow. If you have a machine that actually has a speed setting, you could even just narrow the speed setting down a little bit, right? Because we really want to give ourselves time. Like, look at that, I have a fold in there, right? And so I want to make sure that it's smoothed out. And that's because I'm giving myself the added challenge of not sliding it over the throat so that I can end up with very smooth gathers. So on this side here, the extra fabric is pointed away, so I don't need to worry about it getting caught. But I'm still feeling with my finger under here to make sure that everything feels smooth. And I'm coming to the bottom of the underarm, and we'll be approaching the gathers in just a moment. T minus, yep, there they are. All right, and so again, I'm going to kind of make sure that I've got get another pin to pull that thread up. And I've got the gathers out of the way, give the gathering thread another little tug because it sometimes loses its oomph there at the end. Make sure I've got the seam allowance right so I can go to the inside of it. And now I'm getting started. As you can see, I've got kind of a little jam up there, and so I can spread that out a little bit, right, between the 2 pins, make sure that it's very nice looking. I know that I especially pay attention to this because gathers in a puffed sleeve was one of my first sewing tragedies when I was about 12 and I was making my Easter dress all by myself at my grandmother's house. This was my grandmother in town, so I was really alone. She was self-employed as a realtor, so she was probably out with clients, and I was upstairs using the sewing machine on the table in her dressing room, and I got the gathers all wrong on one of the sleeves and just sat down and cried. So you can see there, I can see a little collision coming. Might take a longer pin and actually spread that out. It's because I was talking to you about my childhood stories as opposed to paying attention. But the gathers are really important to me. I know one of the reasons why I designed my own shirt was because as a larger lady, as a muscular woman, I have found that the first place that off-the-rack clothes fail to fit me is in accommodating my arms. And of course, I lift weights, so some of the bulk in my arms is in fact muscle. Some of the bulk in my arms is just German evolution to protect me from cold winters, I guess. So I have a nice extra fat layer in my arm too. And so if I have a bit of extra in the sleeve, it can all fit me better. You may not need that, I get it, but if you do happen to need a little bit extra in your sleeve, then learning how to put in smooth gathers can be really helpful. So as I take the pins out, I'm double checking that everything was done smoothly on this side, right? The side that will go against my shoulder here, right? And then I'm double checking that it's all smooth on this side. Now I could take out this gather stitch right here, and I will go ahead and trim the ends of the gather stitch partly so that when I serge it, those gather stitch threads don't get caught in the serging and make it impossible for me to remove them later. So if I wanted to remove it even after I serged it, I would just take a seam ripper and kind of pull it up from the middle. But I'm going to leave it in now because it'll help the gathers to sort of match when I do the serging, which I have to do off camera because it's just not quite within reach of my sewing arm. And I said that, but I realized it isn't strictly true. So if you can put up with a little bit of racket, I just saw a pin there I needed to take out. So it's very important to make sure that you don't have any pins in when you're serging. I think this is an especially important one to show you. As I serge, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to work on the inside so that I can keep an eye on things, and because I just know that the outside is smoother than the inside, so if I'm going to have a problem, it's likely to happen on the inside. And here's another situation where I want to be really calm and slow because this blade right here could end up chopping a hole in the sleeve if I am not sure that I only have my seam allowance there. All right, so stand by for a little bit of racket. My foot pedal got okay, I actually had it off is what it was. All right, and so you can see that I'm just definitely using my hands to make sure that there's nothing under there as I stitch. And I'm stopping every so often to pull the whole thing towards me. But this is probably the trickiest bit of doing a one-shot. All right, there we go. And let's go ahead and just repeat that in case you want to see it again. And we can easily do that because I have a second sleeve. So again, I'm starting just at the bottom of the, I want to make sure I get the notch in there, just at the bottom of the gathers. And taking my time and stopping to feel that nothing else is under there. Here's where I didn't trim this one. This is that flat seam that comes from the front, and this is where I'm definitely glad I checked before that it was smooth before I actually allowed the serger to trim that off. Because that extra fabric is gone now. All right, so we've got our sleeves attached. and we can move on to finishing the front opening. I will go ahead and press this right on the top there, just to make sure that it's nice and smooth.